of the Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute. Good morning, Patrick Tuohy.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for checking in. The state wants us to vote on a minimum wage again. What's going on here?
Well, yes, that's it. Minimum wage comes up around the country every few years. I think it's a standard of some politicians' economic policy, and we've been talking about it in Missouri for the past few years, and so it's kind of no surprise that it's going to come back up again, but it's still bad policy.
I thought the state just sort of nixed the city from being able to raise their own minimum wage. So what's this next new policy?
So this is a bill in the Senate that would raise the statewide minimum wage. So you're absolutely right. Kansas City had tried to raise the minimum wage. The legislature thought it was clear that cities couldn't act on their own, passed legislation to make it even more clear that cities couldn't act on their own. And so, again, now the senator is trying to raise it statewide. I don't think politically it'll go anywhere, and it shouldn't, but it's kind of bad policy that makes people feel good.
Why is a state minimum wage a bad idea, Patrick Tuohy?
So every day you and I and your listeners go to the grocery store, we observe a very basic economic truth, which is when the price of something goes up, we buy less of it. And it's true for coffee grounds, it's true for sour cream, it's true for clothing, and it's true for labor. If the government artificially increases the price of labor, employers will buy less of it. And that will manifest itself in either fewer employees, fewer hours for those employees, or they will cut back, or in the case of St. Louis and Kansas City, they may just move across a political boundary into an area where that cost hasn't been mandated.
True, I guess, if you believe that sort of thing. But now I guess steel is going to be 25% more and aluminum is going to be 10% more. So if everything else is going up by government standards, why not raise the minimum wage by government standards?
So that's an excellent point. I'm glad you raised it, because whether we're on the right or the left, whenever the people we don't agree with want to do something, we warn them, well, listen, there are unintended consequences of what you're doing. You're going to affect other actors in the marketplace, and you may end up increasing prices. And so when the president says we're going to put tariffs on, people on the right and left say, hey, prices elsewhere are going to go up. And so when somebody in Jeff City says we want to raise wages, everybody should say, well, you're going to drive prices up elsewhere. And I think that's the exact right conversation to have. It's a matter of deciding, weighing the consequences and deciding what's best, but at least understanding that there are consequences. And in my experience, a lot of people who support an increase in the minimum wage don't understand that there are consequences. They think it's just free money, and there are fat cats who are sitting at the top of McDonald's, and they make millions of dollars, and we can force them to pay workers more. But there are real consequences oftentimes for those very workers.
Patrick Tuohy, how does somebody raise a family on $8 an hour? I need to go to school. I need to. My car's broken down. I got health care costs. My rent's going up. My energy bills are going up. Gas is at $3 a gallon. I make $8 a gallon. How do I survive?
Well, not really. Only about 13% of households where somebody earns the minimum wage are at or below the poverty level. 44% of people who earn the minimum wage are living in houses that are 3 times the poverty rate. It's a clumsy way. If you're trying to address poverty, and that is a worthwhile policy objective, increasing the minimum wage is not the way to do it. Even Christine Romer, President Obama's economic advisors, said it is a bad way to address poverty. If, as a state, we say we want to address poverty, there are other ways to do it. We can adopt an earned income tax credit, which Show Me has been researching it, and there's a lot of merit to that program. But simply raising the minimum wage is sort of like a blunt instrument. It does a lot of damage. It has a lot of repercussions, and it doesn't necessarily address poverty.
You know, Patrick, one of the biggest, not one, the biggest cost to a business is their employees.
Absolutely.
And when you raise the hourly rate, you think it's only $1 an hour. What's the big deal? Well, I mean, if you got 50 employees every hour, that's $50 extra an hour. That you can see how that sort of adds up pretty quickly. But what I think people are afraid of, to sort of bolster your side of the argument, is if it's so expensive to hire someone, pay their taxes and everything else, It's just easier to buy a computer and have that computer do the job instead of paying you.
Well, we're seeing that around the state in Missouri. There was a McDonald's that opened up in St. Joe that has all kiosks. We're seeing those more in the city. You've got them in St. Louis. I was at an Applebee's, and they've got a little kind of tablet at the table that allows you to print and write your bill. So companies are already realizing that they can cut down their labor costs through technology, which, by the way, has been one of the great successes of the American economy, which is incentivizing people to find cheaper ways to do things and reducing costs to everybody. But it's happening in labor too. And although addressing the minimum wage or increasing the minimum wage only exacerbates a problem we already see, the real problem is you've got people at the bottom of the economic ladder, right, in St. Louis and Kansas City and around Missouri. They really need that first job to introduce them into the workforce. It's that first rung on the ladder to prosperity. They need to learn how to show up on time, to deal with a manager. And if we increase the minimum wage, there are fewer opportunities for those people to get that first job experience.
The bottom line is this, though. I mean, who isn't the economy at full employment? So if you're working at an $8 an hour job, how hard is it to go find a job that's going to pay you $13 an hour or $14 an hour or $15 an hour? Because the economy is doing so well, employers are begging for people.
Yes, I think that is true over the past year and going forward. We're going to see, I imagine, wages go up on their own because there's more competition, right? Employers are having to fight for the same number of workers. So wages will go up. We saw that with some of the tax relief. People are giving bonuses. So I think there are ways to address poverty, ironically, by getting government out of the way rather than having government play, traffic cop.
Patrick Tuohy, all this stuff and more at the Show Me Institute website?
Yes, sir. Thank you much.
All right. Patrick Tuohy, Director of Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute. And it's showme.org. Show Me Institute. Showmeinstitute.org. Patrick, thanks.